Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today. She's a designer, educator, and researcher interested in new narratives and practices in design that push the disciplinary boundaries and definitions of the subject. She is a reader, associate professor in anti-post decolonial histories, theories, praxis at the Decolonizing the Arts Institute at University of Arts London. She is the author of two books, Designerly Ways of Knowing, a working inventory of things a designer should know, and Design Otherwise, Transforming Design Education in the Arab World Region. Please join me in welcoming Danah Abdulla. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Are you ready for 20 questions?
Yeah, let's go.
Great. Question one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So I'm a designer, educator, and researcher. I would say that I am always all three. Those are never in any particular order. Main job is being an educator where I get to teach people about design. I get to do research on design and talk about design all the time. And of course, as we know with design, a lot of logistics. I like to also, well, I mean, I write a lot about design. I try to share ideas on design to spark provocations, and that's in a nutshell what I do.
Great. And just a note for the audience, if you guys are interested in the 2025 episodes, please check out our episode with Kareem Rashid. That was a big one for us. Number two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
I would say that it's my ability to notice things that I observe in ways that others do not. So I would put this due to my interest in range, in being a generalist, seeing how other disciplines inform each other rather than operating in silos. Within design, we tend to focus a lot on specializations, and we often overlook the fact that um, our discipline actually touches on so many other different things. And if we're too closed off to it, we kind of miss the larger picture. And I feel like that's something that makes me different, able to make those connections where others don't.
Great. Number three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
This is a tough question because you're consistently thinking about purpose and, do I have a purpose? And I feel like one of the reasons why I teach at a university level, why I do research and design is because it's something that I figured I was actually good at and I can do it and I'm able to do that better than I am kind of designing on a day to day. Um, and I do it because it also motivates me and it also helps me learn and grow as a person, as an educator. Um, and it's always great to kind of follow students on their journey, to see how they grow throughout, in the case of the UK, the 3 years that they're with us, or on a master's program, the 1, 2 years, or a PhD program, well over 5, 6 years. Um, and just kind of being able to shape maybe the youth of tomorrow in terms of what their ideas of design are, and how that in turn could shape the discipline in the future.
Great. So some people struggle with number four, and the question is, what does your future look like?
I think it's hard to see that at the moment. I have really been thinking about our obsession, as a society and also as design, with the future. And this leads us to forget the present and to constantly look forward to something that may not happen. And within the design field, this is quite prominent, how future thinking we are, and yet we are never actually prepared for it. So the world is collapsing, and we aren't learning from what happened before. We're not learning from now. We focus on the future we're just not prepared for. Or if we do imagine these futures, they're quite conservative, that kind of accepts things as they are. That is more or less the same. So I think for me, what I'm trying to do now is, rather than thinking of what my future is how can I learn from the present, um, rather than kind of look forward to something and plan towards that in a way that just sets me on that one goal. Um, that's kind of where my thinking is now. I'm not necessarily answering your question in the way that you've asked it, but I'm placing it in terms of what I'm thinking about in terms of the future and my space in it.
Great. Five we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
The notion of place is very centered in my research. I wrote a whole book on contextually based education. I talk about context so much. And more recently, I've really been looking at hyper localized type of design projects, looking at particularly where I am, which is in London, England. Um, and discovering kind of the richness of the design stories. We often get bogged down in this idea of looking too globally and forgetting, where we are, and you end up with these very universal type of narratives. Um, but context and place are crucial. They help ground us, they help us give us a more understanding of the problem. Um, and they help us connect with the people that we're going to be working with rather than, sitting here at a desk and being completely disconnected from the space where I'm working in. And that's why I always base every project I am on the context and try to emphasize context. So place is very important. Now, for me, place is multiple places because I am from multiple places, and so it's always an interesting thing to think about, but definitely something that I center completely in my practice.
Great. Six, you're starting from the beginning. What advice do you give your former younger self?
Oof, this this is a hard one because I don't know. I guess it goes back to your other question in terms of, well, not location, but context as well, right? Is every decision you make is based on the context in which, or the time in which you were inhabiting, right? I, oh my God, this one's harder than I thought, even though I thought I had a good answer for you and I don't, but maybe it is, um, to say yes to a lot of things and to start to realize to say no to the things that do not push you forward earlier on in your career, rather than letting these so-called good opportunities take advantage of you, basically.
Great. And what's a day in your life like?
Well, I have a baby, so we wake up at odd hours. My day could start at 3 a.m., it could start at 5 a.m., and then it could start again at 6 a.m. Usually with a little bit of seeing what baby needs, giving her some breakfast, getting ready to go to bringing her over to daycare. And then the good thing about being mostly in research is, or being in academia, is that usually you don't have the same day twice. So I don't just kind of go to an office, sit there, and I'm going to write. I think all my days are quite different. There are days that are, whether they're kind of meeting heavy. There are days where, okay, I have to talk to X amount of partners in terms of working on this research project. I have PhD supervisions, I'm teaching a class, that sort of thing. I also work across campuses, so I'm not consistently in the same space. But most, if I'd have to kind of sum it down, it's after after my baby is sent over to daycare, I'm at work. I am kind of getting down to doing emails, having a pocket of time for writing, whether that's a grant, whether that's a lecture, whether that's an article, whether that's, digging through other ideas for potential projects or books. Um, and that's more or less, and then you kind of have like meetings sporadically in between. And then I try to finish my day where I feel like I have been as productive as I can be. Then we go home, and the rest of the time is family time.
Hmm, nice. Okay, number eight, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
So of course I'm a voracious reader, although I have less time now due to parenthood. I watch the news. I wouldn't say I'm a news junkie, but I am absolutely always watching Al Jazeera. Read the other papers to kind of keep tabs on what's going on regionally. I am really into local news lately. So I've been subscribing to some newsletters, and the good thing is that there's been this sort of uh, space on Substack where a lot of people have been producing local kind of London newsletters. And then even within kind of local London, you have your own borough where you are. So you're also keeping tabs on what's going on in your specific areas. I still do love to review some magazines, looking through newsletters, and going back to that idea of range. I have that range that I cover multiple topics, and of course, as a researcher, you always just follow the breadcrumbs to kind of lead you to somewhere else. I attend a lot of talks and lectures, of course, again, much less now, but this helps inspire a lot of my ideas on what I'm writing about, where people's thinking is. And of course, it's asking people what they're reading, reviewing things to see if they're relevant. And that I hope kind of keeps me up to date. And most importantly, it's also, what are the students reading? What are they interested in? And that way you can start to connect some of these things um, with the curricular content, to stay relevant and to stay up to date. Because obviously, there's you're looking at a huge generation gap, and the way that things are consumed are very different now. I don't think I consume social media in a lot of ways that my friends do, and I've sort of been going off of it. I think that this sort of everything happens so much mentality is it just made me feel like too overwhelmed. I kind of also feel really overwhelmed by the newsletters. But in terms of just creating a system in my head of, okay, what is this? How is this relevant? In order to know more about, and then kind of pursuing that topic. Um, yeah,
Great. Okay, 9 tools. Do you use both digital and analog tools?
yeah, absolutely. So I am very technologically savvy, thankfully. I know that this is kind of a um, it's funny to see how much access we have to knowing how to use technology and how little some people know how to use it. But also at the same time, I don't let it dictate my entire life. I think there's this balance between the digital and analog that's really important. So I have recently taken to I love notebooks, returned to carrying a small notebook everywhere with me. So even having it by my bedside to jot down ideas, and then I review them every few days. So this is really important because it sort of acts as this way, not only not to look at my phone, but to constantly think about like, okay, it's easy to pull out your phone, put it on Apple Notes, but then it lives on in this series of just random stuff that you've written up. Whereas with a notebook, it's more intentional for me to review all the notes. And I mean, sometimes I will review the backlog of maybe 20 years of notebooks and just, find a gem or something. In terms of digital tools, I use quite a lot depending on the project. So, I'm really big on Notion, not just using it in personal day-to-day stuff, but also with the students of work. Miro as well is a good one. I'm a big proponent of InDesign. I love InDesign. Never understood people who kind of create these huge layouts in Illustrator. Illustrator has its place, Photoshop has its place, but InDesign is a really powerful tool. And once you know how to use it, you just kind of use it for everything. Evernote, I am a proud beta user since 2009. Although I do think that Evernote is quite buggy, but I mean, I can't tell you how much stuff I have on there. And of course, tools have their limitations because they force you into a way of working that can be different to your own process. So that's where I sort of think, okay, where does this use of this tool end? Um, Also big Google Slides user because it makes finding stuff and then copying it easier, particularly for my teaching materials. And it also responds to multiple platforms like Zoom and Teams more easily. However, I recently had massive, massive failure with Google Slides when the internet went down and I could not access my slides at all. So there is that sort of, again, limitation of digital tools, whether both in terms of process and in terms of connectivity.
Nice. Halfway number 10. How do you deal with work life or life work balance?
So I read an interview recently with this academic called Hans Joachim Both, and he studied the biographies of 1,500 ordinary people in the 1930s in the US. And the central question being what mattered most to people. And so what emerged was how humans, by doing something meaningful, finding fulfillment, it's not necessarily about financial security. So he discusses examples of people who took great pride in what they do, whatever their profession. So whether they were a doctor, a librarian, a cashier, and so on and so forth. However, recently that work-life balance assumes that happiness and work are in opposition. So work is not real life. There's this clear separation through the statement, and then we work to make money to pay for leisure. And this is exemplified in the rise of, let's say, bullshit jobs, like David Graeber called them, and general poor work ethic, carelessness, just doing my job kind of attitude, which you're seeing more and more. And there's been a lot written about this in terms of why do people not don't have that kind of craft within their jobs anymore. And I've been thinking a lot about what this kind of work-life balance means since I had a baby last year. And I was thankful to have 6 months paid leave from work, which is very little in some places and a lot in others. But there's this impossibility of being good at all of these things, being a good mother, being a good academic, something has got to give. And to me, that's a broken system. Why isn't the infrastructure available to enable a village to raise a child and have us also thrive at work at the same time? Why must I make a choice? And why is it also seen negatively if women want to go back to work after having a baby? For me, work is, and it's not something I do to make money. It's something I do because I enjoy it. It's a huge part of who I am. And I bring my all and more every time I enter a space, and I give when I can, at work, and my all to my child, to my husband, to my relationships. So having this work-life balance, I think, something we need to assess as a society. What does it actually mean? And thinking about different ways of imagining how we balance these things together in order to enable us to be happier.
Great. 11. If you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
Um, don't know. I mean, judging by my skills, I've been told that I should be a comedian. In many ways, being an educator is being a comedian. You're entertaining people, you're performing. Other candidates, maybe secret agent, fixer, cleaner. But all jokes aside, I think running a sort of space that brings people together with a shared common purpose would probably be the other thing I would see myself doing.
Hmm. Great. And what would you not like to do with your career?
Uh, Something that does not bring me purpose. I hate to kind of pinpoint it to one career because I think for anyone, whatever they do, if they put their all, they kind of enjoy that, whether it's doing this because they get to interact with people or they like to work with numbers. But if I don't feel like it brings me purpose, I don't think I could do it.
Do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I do, and it's from Angela Davis. It's you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time.
Hmm.
And this quote keeps me in check, despite how difficult it can be and wanting to shut the door on these terrible times, as many have the privilege of doing.
Do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Yes, game changer. I think this is, it's driving me crazy. Every Instagram advert, YouTube advert tells you this thing is a game changer. It's not. Not everything is a game changer, and I think it's just overused, and it's driving me a bit manic.
Great. And 15, you're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
I thought about this question and thought about what I have been, what my friends would refer to me as. And there's a friend of mine who has called me a force of nature, but that's 3 words. So I'm going to say subversive. And I
Mm.
use this one because a former colleague of mine, when I left my first academic job, she said, oh, we're going to miss you. You were always so subversive. And it really, it was taken aback because I never thought of myself or what I do as subversive. But I realized in that moment that for many, and at the time as well, that it is or I was. And so it was. There was a running joke that we should just put it on a t-shirt and wear it. But yeah, why not? It's a good descriptor.
What keeps you up at night?
Well, what doesn't keep me up at night? So for the last 2 years, the collapse of humanity, genocide. For the last year, a baby. For the last few months, the ridiculous flat buying process in the UK. So it's this huge combination of things that just makes for a deadly cocktail. So let's say I haven't been getting much sleep, still keeps me up at night.
Mm. What's a dream you're chasing?
To imagine the world anew.
What inspires you?
Um, this one is a very difficult one because we're living in a moment where a genocide is being live streamed, and but with all of this, I am inspired by my Palestinians, by my Palestinian people. Throughout we see how Palestinians in Gaza demonstrate how constraints are opportunities, how Israel destroys and Palestinians build. You're looking at the entire daily lives of Palestinians through appropriating water, access to roads, imposing currency, preventing access to oil and gas reserves, being subjected to Israeli law, population registry, imposing customs rules, restriction of movement. There's no way to leave without these controlled borders or checkpoints. And then the people of Gaza are being starved into submission, no electricity, no clean water. And yet, despite all of this, and even before the genocide, a 19-year siege on Gaza, 77 years of occupation, you had this poor and fragile infrastructure. These conditions, they're not happenstance nor natural, they're human-made problems. You're seeing the ingenuity, when you destroy ambulances, the destruction of lorries and cars leads to donkeys and horses being the main form of transport for many. Using solar panels and connect routers to batteries to charge phones and stay connected online when there's no electricity. When the cellular network was destroyed by Israel, eSIMs were used to connect the internet, ensure accessibility to the rest of the world. They produced charcoal from tree branches to cook, transforming everyday cooking pots to work with coal to bake bread and nourish families. You even had this local food blogger who made videos using the items from aid packages to alleviate the burden for parents. Other inventions use scraps to create water filtration systems. So Palestinians survive. They find ways to maneuver, to fight back against violence, and they just, Israel destroys, Palestinians build. And that is incredibly inspirational at this time of, where you're sitting there sometimes in a very, very helpless state at what you're seeing.
Great. And last couple here, number 19. Any advice you'd like to share?
This one comes from my book, Designerly Ways of Knowing, which is to not limit oneself by the imaginations of others, to question everything in a constructive and productive way, and to learn to be resourceful.
Great. And finally, number 20. How can our listeners keep tabs on you and what's our call to action?
So, I have been kind of weaning off the social media sites, not really engaging with Instagram, but I do have a newsletter called The Optimist, which you can find on Substack. I think the handle is dabd.substack.com. I could be wrong. But I also have a website, yeah, old school website running on cargo, which is dabdulla.com. And any way to contact me is through there.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining today. I'm really glad to reconnect with London and hear your ideas. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Thomas.